Hey everyone, coming at you with another kind of discussion video today. I don't do a lot of like gear review videos or anything like that. I mean, there's a million and one of them out on the internet, you know, so that's not my thing, and that's not what I do anyway. Now, if there's a piece of kit that I like, I'll overview it and kind of give some pros and cons and my feedback on it just from the end user experience with it. But I mean, just gear reviews for the sake of gear reviews and stuff, I don't do that stuff. So I know some people have asked about that in the past. It's like, no, I have no interest in it. So you'll never see my channel being sponsored and me doing ads for stuff that I don't use or don't believe in or whatever. So that aside, discussion topic of today, it's going to be more about mindset and mentality and training and conditioning. There's a lot of people, and you know, this is how the internet is, being an open forum, because it is. That includes YouTube, where everybody has a soapbox to stand on and talk about things and get charged up and fired up and go, oh, you know, we need to do this, we got to do that, rah, 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 rah. You know, if this situation happens, I'm going to do this, this, and this. A lot of people aren't. When it comes down to mentality, mindset, and the mental conditioning that you need to go through, there's a lot there. Just from the military background and the initial military background, I only did 3.5 years in the Army. I did one contract in the infantry, and then I've done 17 years as a contractor. So PMC contracting, private military contracting, executive protection, advisory work, you name it. Like, I've done all that, and I do all that in the private sector. With the military side of conditioning, you have your basic training, your OSA, your one station unit training, you know, like for infantry school for us, and you know, you got your training for your other combat arms guys and stuff, and then that baseline of basic training that everyone goes through in the military. But that's just the entry level of mental conditioning, and it's not like it was back in the day either. A lot of that doctrine has changed, and civilians are getting that baseline of training with mentality and stuff. You know, there are some shooting courses and stuff out there where people go out of their way to do some minuscule semblance of mental conditioning. A lot more so with good concealed carry defensive pistol courses and things like that, if you have good instructors. But even then, that's a very, 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 very small part of it. The mental conditioning, like in infantry school, and this is, so earlier GWAT, we were shown, and it had just happened not terribly long before, you know, the Nick Berg beheading video. We were shown that in training. We were shown raw combat footage that does not exist on YouTube and a lot of other places. You will never see it. Of, you know, some correlating stuff you can see on like Funker 530 and other websites now, with a lot of the combat footage that is publicly viewable now. But like that early stuff, you know, the early stuff that you're not going to find anywhere now of trauma injuries and gunshot wounds and IED blast injuries and stuff, and the trauma process with medical training and everything. And that's one part of it, is visual aid tools, visual learning tools, to help get some of that mental conditioning and mental training and preparedness in, apart from the learning tools like with trauma and stuff. But the mental conditioning aspect of it as well, that's only part of it. With actual training, you have to go out and do certain things. We go out and do certain things for mental training and physical training that ties into mental conditioning, being able to work under stress. Just going to the flat range and doing that stuff isn't going to do it. Watching a couple of videos isn't just going to do it. Just alone, that's not going to do it. safety is good, but then there's certain elements within advanced and expanded training that's actually important for physical response conditioning with mental training and conditioning, but also mental conditioning in itself too. Now, is anybody truly prepared for combat their first time? No, not really. There's a lot of training that helps though, and that's a lot of training that civilians don't get in a lot of ways. Even with the excellent training groups that I recommend, like One Shepherd and things like that, you're not getting the full extent of that training either for mental and in conjunction physical but mental conditioning and training. There are some things that you can do, and you do need to do them safely. Obviously, safety is important, but there's a overburden of safety to some extent with certain training outside of certain professional circles and certain training circles, where it's just you just can't do anything to enhance your mental preparedness and that physical training aspect that ties into mental conditioning. So there's certain aspects of it that you can't do. Well, you can do, but you shouldn't be filming it because YouTube will take that shit down. But there is training that you can do out there that just helps accelerate some of the conditioning. But circling back to where mental training and mental conditioning comes in for civilians and the prepper community and people planning for all of these perceived things that could potentially happen, or statistically, however minuscule and small or more in a plausible bracket of possibility. A lot of people will say a lot of things and talk tough and hem and haw and say all these things, but when the metal meets the meat and the hammer drops, a lot of people are not going to be ready for it. Just mentally. They're not going to be ready for it. There's a lot of people that are going to crumble. There's a lot of people that are the woulda, coulda, shouldas, with, oh, I could have joined the military, blah, 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 and then you got the people like, oh, I would have punched drill sergeant in the face, now you wouldn't have, shut the fuck up. There's a lot of other people that say they're going to do these things and have a lot of big talk, but in the long run, they don't do anything about it. A good thing with combatives training, hand-to-hand combat training, and there's a couple of good instructors out there. I've mentioned Bill Wolf and some other guys before. There's an Australian guy too, with conditioning in that way and getting into somebody's face, as part of that training aspect. How do they react? Because a lot of people are not going to react how you expect them to. There's the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, the 4 Fs. A lot of people are going to freeze or fawn. Some are going to flight, some are going to run. There's only a small percentage who are instinctually, however you want to say that, actually going to go into fight mode. That's a very small percentage. You have to train and condition for that. So it's the same with combatives in that aspect. It's the same from combatives as it is for combat training, weapons training in the larger picture and things like that. Not just defensive, even though it's very important for that, but in the larger picture with a variety of situations that could happen. Or just preparing yourself mentally for going into military service or the private security sector, PMC training, whatever it is. Even though a lot of the time there, and I've talked about that many times, like you're going to have some military experience anyway, background anyway, or law enforcement background, whatever. So, I digress. Getting back to that point, like, people are not mentally ready. They're not for that kind of thing. And especially, majority of people living in cities, that's why they're cities, large populations, the urban fight is dangerous and nasty. Most people are going to be shitting their pants. That's just a fact of the matter. They're going to be crapping themselves, and they're going to want to hide in a hole. Getting out and doing the proper training, the proper mental conditioning and mental training to be ready for those kinds of situations. I mean, you saw with riots a little bit. That's again one type of situation one iota of example to take from, to train for. That's one thing. You know, there's a lot more, obviously, but I mean, that's a prevalent one. That's a potentiality. It's happened before many times, and it can happen again. How do you train for that? And if it does get more aggressive and it gets dangerous and people start dying, you know, what are you going to do? These mental conditionings, these mental trainings need to be taken upon with practical application training. Because without that, people are just stuck in their own head and they're talking. They're not doing. So that's really what I'm getting at with it. Develop a training program where you have practical application training. Practice in ways that you can, again, safely and with a good planning and mindfulness. Combat conditions, riot conditions, daily defensive shoot conditions, because those are never going to be flat range examples. They're just not. That's not how it works in the real world. You know, those kinds of things, and then a couple of other things apart from the visual aids, getting out and doing some practical training, because it's a mindset thing. You need people playing OPFOR. You need people being up in your face and being violent and being a factor, because the enemy always has a say, being a factor that forces you to mentally train yourself but also be adaptive in the situations. This is something that isn't talked about too terribly much, and something that I wanted to talk about because it needs to be talked about, and it needs to be this thing that, hey, guess what? There's a lot of people like doing all these flashy things and whatnot, you know, and showing all this flat range training. And while that's good for fundamentals, that's not preparing you mentally and adaptively, physically, otherwise, for the range of situations that you're going to have to deal with, or could potentially deal with. Again, carjackings, that's a regular thing. You know, robberies and stuff like that, that's a regular thing. Could riots happen? Absolutely. Could something more extreme and exigent happen? I mean, scale of statistical possibilities all across the board, from very minuscule to, yeah, that's much more plausible. Whatever it is. Make sure you're doing your assessments and things like that. But that aside, training. Mental conditioning, mental training, mindset preparedness, because that's just as important as your preparedness with everything else. And getting out and doing practical application training that brings those factors and all together to help you be able to work through a myriad of really horrible situations and problems, situations to be in, and problems that you're going to have to deal with. So, serious on this one, but it's a very fucking serious thing. And many people have died for various reasons because of it. Either not being prepared, or wrong place, wrong time, you know, not reacting properly, a number of things. So that's what I wanted to talk about here. A little off the cuff. It's important shit though, so don't be a liability. Yeah, that's about all I got for this one. So think about it. Start getting a curriculum together and training with your people and stuff. So that's all I got. Battle up.